On October 11th, 1992, Deion Sanders did the impossible. On Saturday, October 10th, following NLCS Game 4, Deion took a flight to Miami. He suited up and played cornerback for all but one snap with the Falcons against the Dolphins. After that game, he took a helicopter to the airport, flew back to Pittsburgh, and dressed just in time for Game 5 of the NLCS. Even though he didn't get on the field during Game 5, he was ready to come off the bench by first pitch. This is, objectively, the coolest person to ever exist. All throughout his baseball career, Deion's bravado and aura overshadowed his actual performance on the diamond. October of 1992 was no different. This video is about the best week of baseball Deion ever played, and we'll get to that shortly. But the lead up to the 1992 World Series makes it all the more improbable. Primetime just suited up for two different teams in two different cities playing two different sports, all within a few hours. While most fans loved the stunt, and some journalists like Chris Berman lauded the achievement, Sanders was largely grilled by the media. He already had a strained relationship with Atlanta's beat reporters, and things only got worse when CBS's Tim McCarver repeatedly bashed him to an audience of millions during the NLCS.
But I think you summed it up succinctly. He gave him his word, and he did not deliver on it. The rest means little by comparison.
Yep. McCarver believed that Sanders played the football game in Miami solely for his Nike endorsement.
For whatever his reasons are. Personal glory, his shoe contract. I was not at all surprised that in Pat O'Brien's interview with Deion on the plane last night that ran on the NFL Today, Deion was wearing the hat of his shoe company.
Braves GM John Schuerholz, a man who definitely helped owners collude against players back in the 80s, publicly criticized Sanders for breaking his word that he'd be a full-time ball player if he was on the playoff roster. Sanders later said that he never went back on his word, and that by not missing any games, he was effectively a full-time ball player. He said that he never agreed that he wouldn't play football. It was clear whose side the media took. Just look at these headlines from that week. Deion's self-serving move, Deion flies off on shaky ground, Deion earns his frequent liar miles, Sanders proves he's nothing more than a jerk. Not very creative, huh, Bob? Half Brave, half Falcon, all child, and my personal favorite, prime time is Cube Boob. Deion understood his value as an athlete and as a celebrity, and he had no issue speaking his mind or showing off his talents. But it was never at the expense of his team. The way he saw things, he was doing what was best for both of his teams. The Falcons and Braves both needed him, so he played for both. If that doesn't scream team, what does? Said Braves third baseman Terry Pendleton. When asked about the speculated clubhouse tension, Hall of Fame teammate John Smoltz said, "We thought it was ridiculous. There were no issues in our clubhouse. Zero." These quotes are from a great article in The Athletic last year that I've linked in the description for you to check out. The Braves were up 3-1 in the NLCS when Deion ran out on the gridiron in Miami. Barry Bonds was putting up no fight for his Pirates, so Deion was the perfect source of internal adversity for the media. He was gonna be in all the papers, whether or not he was hitting, winning, or being the perfect teammate. The Braves ended up clinching the pennant in 7 games, and Deion went over 5 with 3 strikeouts in the series, all off the bench. Reporters speculated that Deion's stunt would cost him a role on the World Series roster. Considering Schuerholz's reaction and Deion's NLCS performance, that isn't really unreasonable. The thing about Deion is that he was a football player first. Bo Jackson is the only real comparison, and he wouldn't join the Raiders until after the Royals season was over. Baseball was clearly Bo's first love. Deion was the inverse. In 1991, he played baseball through July, slugging a huge 3-run homer on the last day of the month to beat the Pirates. Then, he left the Braves and joined the Falcons for training camp. He suited up for a few games with the Braves at the end of the season to help with the playoff push, mostly during the Falcons' bye week. But Deion wasn't on the Braves' playoff roster. In '92, he broke out with his best baseball season, and he was a regular starter for the Braves through August. Once the NFL regular season began, he played a half-dozen Braves home games, mostly as a pinch runner. There was a constant back and forth for his services between the two teams. After all, He was the best cornerback in the entire world, but he was also a great baseball player in 1992, swiping 26 bases, playing good defense in all 3 outfield spots, and ultimately accumulating over 3 wins above replacement in just over 300 plate appearances. Let me reiterate, if football is Deion Sanders' job, then baseball is Deion Sanders' hobby, and he put up a better baseball season in 1992 than Bo Jackson ever did. He was the Braves' 3rd most valuable position player that season, even though he played just 97 games. Since they had an incredibly deep outfield, they could survive without him, but manager Bobby Cox wanted him as an option for the World Series, so he made the roster. And this time, Deion agreed to take a few weeks away from the Dirty Birds. In doing so, Deion Sanders nearly won World Series MVP. Prime had started just 2 games since August, tallying just 2 hits and a walk over his last 16 plate appearances. I think more people assumed that he'd take on a similar role that he did in the NLCS, pinch hitting for pitchers or pinch running in big spots, maybe staying in on defense. But after not seeing the field in Game 1, Neon Deion was penciled in as the Braves' number 2 hitter and starting left fielder for Game 2. The Blue Jays were starting David Cone on the mound, and Sanders owned Cone. Cone was one of the best pitchers in the sport at the time. 1992 was his 3rd consecutive season leading MLB in strikeouts. He led MLB in FIP the previous year, and he made the All-Star team before being traded to the Blue Jays at the waiver deadline. During that season, Sanders went 6 for 10 with a homer and a walk off of Coney. Deion single-handedly accounted for nearly 4% of the hits that Cone gave up as a Met in 1992, despite taking just over 1% of his opposing plate appearances. Without Cone, there's a great chance that Deion doesn't even make the roster, let alone hit number 2 in the lineup, and Deion will tell you that himself.
Thank God David Cone, and I was hitting like 600 or 700 lifetime off Cone. If it wouldn't have been no David Cone, I would have never played in the World Series. So every time I see Cone or I see an ice cream cone, I just smile and I get happy. Because if it wasn't for Cone, I would have never played.
I'm not sure what it was about Cone. Sanders must have seen the ball well out of his hand. On the first pitch he saw in his 3rd start since August, Sanders nearly put one into the seats. Dave Winfield, one of the few athletes to be drafted to more pro sports leagues than Deion, made the catch with his back touching the wall. Cone walked Deion on 4 pitches his next time up, and after 2 pickoff attempts, Prime swiped second without a throw. He was stranded at 3rd after a great play from Robbie Alomar kept a Pendleton base hit in the infield. In the 5th, with the game deadlocked at 2 runs apiece, Deion took the 2nd strike he saw that day to right field for a base hit. Cone tried his best to keep him close, throwing over twice to first and even pitching out, but Sanders stole second anyway and advanced to 3rd on the bad throw. Prime single-handedly sparked a rally that manufactured 2 runs and knocked Cone out of the game early. Against Cone in Game 2, Sanders saw 5 balls and 2 strikes. They resulted in a walk, a line drive base hit, and a fly ball to the wall. With Deion on base, Cone attempted 4 pickoffs and a pitch out. His preoccupation with Sanders on the bases almost certainly led to the walk of Pendleton in the 5th, and Deion still stole 2 bases and got an extra base on the error, which allowed him to come in to score. His job was to beat David Cone, and that's exactly what he did. The next time Deion came up to bat, it was against Todd Stottlemyre in the 7th. Prime lined out to short on the 3rd strike he saw during that game. The Jays took a 5-4 lead in the bottom of the 8th, which brought Sanders up with the game on the line. 1 runner on with 2 outs in the 9th. Jays closer Tom Hankey finally got Deion to chase, and he fouled off a couple of pitches to fall behind the count 1-2. But Prime battled, fouling off 3 more pitches, allowing Ron Gant to steal second, then taking his walk, about 6 minutes after the at-bat began. Deion had a chance to tie the game, but he took what he was given and passed the baton to Pendleton, who was ultimately the better hitter. Despite Prime's best efforts, Pendleton popped out to 3rd and the Braves dropped the game. Deion increased the Braves' chances of winning by 12.6%. According to win probability added. His performance was so impressive that he kept his name in the lineup for Game 3, even against not David Cone. And he kept things rolling, getting a base hit with 2 strikes in the 1st and then stealing 2nd. Deion beat out an infield single in the 3rd, He then got involved with what should have been the first World Series triple play since 1920, but the second base umpire saved him from the embarrassment. In the 5th, Sanders ripped a double down the line to right. As you can see, he came up gimpy jogging to second. I didn't know until I watched back this footage for this video, but Deion Sanders played the entire 1992 season with a stress fracture in his left foot. Deion Sanders played his best MLB season and his first-team All-Pro NFL season with a broken foot. He suffered the hairline fracture at the end of spring training, and doctors said that he could play through it as long as he could withstand the pain. So he did, but playing all year prevented the bone from properly healing. Deion was still limping 6 months later, but it didn't stop him from being aggressive on the base paths. Pendleton was up next, and he grounded a ball to the shortstop hole. Being a runner on second base, Deion's supposed to make sure that ball gets through the hole before advancing. It's maybe the second most important rule of base running, besides making the first or third out at third. But this is prime time. Sanders took off for third on contact, sliding in safely and turning what's usually considered a dumb decision into excellent base running. The gamble paid off as he walked home to score the Braves' first run on a David Justice base hit. Deion might score here regardless, but since Justice hit it so hard, Winfield's cannon for an arm and right muddies the waters. Sanders made his first easy out of the series in the 8th, popping out with a man on second. The Braves took the lead later in the inning regardless, but they went on to lose in walk-off fashion in the 9th. Deion hit the bench against the lefty Jimmy Key in Game 4, and the Braves fell behind 3-1 in the series. We're halfway through the World Series, and I'm here to remind you to make sure you're subscribed. It's free, only takes one click, and helps me out a ton. If it didn't, I wouldn't ask. Thanks. Sanders didn't get to see Jack Morris during Game 1, but the Braves' lack of offense with him out of the lineup forced Cox's hand. Prime was back in the 2-hole for Game 5. Morris made him look silly his first time up, striking him out on 3 pitches. In the 3rd, Deion quickly chopped into an easy out at second. He looked vulnerable for all of an hour. With 1 on and 2 out in the 5th, Primetime broke the tie with a line drive base hit to center. He kept the inning going just long enough to get to Morris. The Braves loaded up the bases with 2 outs, and Lonnie Smith hit the dagger.
Carter to the wall. Grand slam, Lonnie Smith.
Prime broke the tie and kept the line moving for the biggest rally of the game. He came up twice more, flying out to center in the 7th, then blooping in his 6th hit of the series in the 9th. Thanks to his earlier hit, neither at-bat was consequential in the Braves' big win. The series was heading back to Atlanta. For Game 6, Deion's favorite starter took the bump for Toronto. Even though Coney got him to ground out in the 1st, the Jays' ace just couldn't keep Prime off his back for good. Deion roped the double down the line with 1 out in the 3rd. It's insane to see this man clearly hobbling around the bases but not losing an ounce of his acceleration or his top speed. Cone struggled to keep a man with a broken foot close to second, and that man took third base with ease. Pendleton hit a deep sac fly on the next pitch to tie the game at 1. This run was created at every level by Deion. Without the double, they don't score. Without the steal of third, they don't score. Then, in the top of the 4th, he saved a run with his glove. Steve Avery was struggling through the inning, allowing a leadoff homer, a double, and a walk of the opposing pitcher. With 2 outs, he allowed a solid base hit to left. Pat Borders got the wave home. Deion gloved the ball and uncorked a perfect throw home on a hop.
Sanders' throw was right on the money to cut down the runner and end the inning.
In the 5th, Deion had another chance to get things going with his bat. There were 2 outs with the runner on first, and Prime got to Cone yet again, ripping a 2-strike base hit up the middle. It was Deion's 8th hit of the series. Despite missing 2 full games, he once again stole second without a throw, his 5th steal in as many attempts during the series. Deion was stranded on second, and just like that, his series was done. Yup. With lefty David Wells entering the game in the 7th, Cox pulled his hottest hitter for Ron Gant. To make things worse, Wells didn't even get a batter out. Otis Nixon got caught stealing, and Gant faced a righty to start the 8th inning. In the bottom of the 9th, the Braves tied the game on a Nixon base hit. With runners on second and third and 2 outs, Deion's spot in the order came up again. Gant flew out in his place, and the game went to extras. I get what Cox was thinking. But Deion hit lefties better than Gant in 1992, and he was undisputedly this team's hottest hitter at the time. Gant faced 2 righties and went 0 for 2, including the biggest spot of the game. The Braves lost in extras, and Deion Sanders never played another World Series game again. In 3.5 games, Deion went 8 for 15 with an OPS north of 1200. He led the Braves in all 3 triple slash stats and tied Nixon in hits and steals. Deion also led the position players in WPA and CWPA. He single-handedly increased the Braves' chances of winning a title by about 15% in just 17 plate appearances. If the Braves won, the only options for World Series MVP would have been him and Tom Glavine. But even with multiple game-changing plays, all to the benefit of Atlanta, the Braves went just 1-3 when Deion played. In the grand scheme of things, plenty of players have had plenty of more impactful World Series, but none of them were playing their second best sport. I wanted to highlight Deion's excellence on the diamond, because it so often gets overshadowed by the spectacle that is prime time. Win or lose, Deion Sanders is all the papers want to talk about, and he's used that to his advantage all throughout his life. But I hate how underappreciated his 1992 baseball season goes. A 6-WAR pace, hitting 30% better than a league average player, with great defense and base running to boot, plus leading his team in nearly every offensive stat in the goddamn World Series. Doing all of that while simultaneously being an all-pro at the second hardest position in the NFL with a broken foot? Too ridiculous for Hollywood. If you ask me, Deion Sanders is the greatest athlete of all time, bar none. Bo is a close second, but he never had a season like Deion's 1992 on the diamond, and I don't think he was as good as prime at football either, regardless of injury. Unfortunately for MLB fans, baseball was always Deion's mistress. He played well from 93 to 95, appearing in about 90 games per year for the Braves, Reds, and Giants. He took the year off from baseball in 1996, when he decided to become a two-way player on the gridiron instead. He tallied nearly 500 yards receiving while remaining the best quarterback in the NFL. Deion played 2 more seasons in MLB, but his production took a steep step back in 1997 and face-planted in 2001. Both with the Reds. As it turns out, you can't take full years away from a sport at the highest level and expect the game to be waiting for you when you return. Unless you're Deion Sanders, the football player. He sat out from the NFL in 2001, 2002, and 2003, before returning at age 37 to play with the Ravens. He wasn't the same shutdown corner he once was, but playing in a rotational role at a high level at this position after 3 years off is simply remarkable. Like him or not, he's also done a pretty damn good job at coaching Colorado's football program. Deion is just a talented man, maybe the most talented man in sports history. And if he played baseball full time, dedicating 100% of his focus to hitting, base running, and playing center field, I have no doubt that he would have been one of the best leadoff hitters in the league. Neon Deion is not of this earth, and we will never see another player like him again. Shout out to my members Adam Wetstein, Zach G, and I Love Misty, who are seeing this video early. If you want early access and to hear your name read here, hit that join button below. For just $4 a month, you get that, plus some extra behind the scenes looks. I'm also planning on adding some player analysis posts behind the paywall this offseason, so if you want some hot takes from the guy who predicted Tarek Skubal's Cy Young, hit that join button today. Thanks.